Next up, we have Jeff Hughes. He is a high school teacher from Kemper Catholic, and he is here to share a little bit about the resources that he uses in his 912 English and speech classrooms. So, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to present today. I'll be coming at things from a little bit of a theoretical angle today as I talk a bit, and that's because of some classes I took at the University of Northern Iowa. Professor Rick Vanderwall showed me the TPACK model for integrating technology, and that's helped to guide my thinking, so I'd like to share some of that reasoning with you today as well. I have an outline. It's online at the littechweebly.com. That is on the agenda that you have. It's http://lit-tech.weebly.com. So if you'd like to go there and take advantage of some of the hyperlinks, you can certainly do that. Here's a bit of a roadmap today. I believe that effective teachers work to strive to find a balance between content, pedagogy, and 21st century technology. And I have worked to increase my skill in increasing each of these TPACK areas. There's a graphic here that's a little bit small, so I'll go ahead and go to the original source. This is a LinkedIn slideshow created by Dan Moss. And what I like about his slideshow is he talks about some of the dangers of putting too much emphasis in one particular area at the expense of the others. For example, with technology, it can be fun, but sometimes it can turn into chasing rabbits. And sometimes I find myself using technology and the toys and the gadgets just for the sake of playing with technology tools and toys and gadgets. So I need to be sure that I'm integrating that with content and with effective teaching strategies. Sometimes with content, it becomes a danger of being the sage on the stage, where the teacher is bearing the responsibility for the critical thinking and the analysis and pulling out what's important from the text. So we want to back away from having that imbalance as well. And pedagogy, I think it's always good to have a good game plan as we go into a lesson plan with our students, but we don't want to do that at the expense of flexibility. So it's good to be well prepared, to have good pedagogical reasons for what we're doing and having a good Maryland Hunter design, but we don't want to lose our flexibility and our opportunities to catch that glimmer of creativity that may come up as students are investigating a text or an activity on their own. So I'm looking for a balance between pedagogy, content, and 21st century technology, which is where the TPACK acronym comes from. Some of the tools I've been using include Storyboard That, which allows students to create a storyboard type comic strip, and it also allows students to create different kinds of graphic organizers. For example, if I wanted to have the students create a character web, you can see one here on the upper right-hand side of the screen. This is a tool students can use to show the relationships between characters and also put in some details about direct and indirect characterization. It's visual. It comes along with a database full of pictures that kids can use. And there's also a sister company under the same umbrella, which is Photos for Class, and students can use those photos as well. Those photos are all approved for classroom and educational use, and they do come with the photo citation already at the bottom of the image. So we can use photos in a responsible and yet a creative way in the classroom. My wife at Kemper, Mrs. Angela Hughes, has developed a book review outline called Hook, Line, and Sinker, or Reeling in Good Books. So this morning I'll talk about some of the ways I've used Storyboard That to explore creating book reviews with students. There are also some resources I can show you from the Storyboard That company, showing how to use Storyboard That to analyze the hero's journey, as imagined by Joseph Campbell. And also, if you're familiar with some drama activities, including Vote, Victory, Obstacles, Tactics, Expectations, or a variation is G.O.T.E, Goals, Others, Tactics, Expectations, you can see how we can use storyboarding to create a character analysis as well. We can use Storyboard That to analyze Freytag's pyramid, or the classic plot structure within literature. And we'll also talk today a bit about Hemingway's Iceberg and something you may not be familiar with before today called Johari Windows. And I'd like to start today by focusing on Johari Windows. I'm interested in looking beyond the mask. What do we hide from each other? What do we hide from ourselves? What do characters hide from each other? And what are some aspects of personality or perspective that characters hide from themselves as well? So I'll begin with exploration of character development and epiphanies using Johari Windows. As I mentioned, I'll start theoretically. Plato's view of education is our only aim is to open the eye of the soul, to bring into activity the hidden power of spiritual vision which lies dormant in every one of us. Plato teaches us that education is designed simply and solely to awaken faculty which every soul contains, by wheeling the soul round and turning it away from the world of change and decay. So Plato's not concerned with the excellences of the mind which may be produced by training and discipline. He doesn't see this as a tabula rasa or a blank slate where the teacher keeps bringing things in and writing on that slate on the student's developing mind. No, it's more about uncovering and revealing what's already there in the way that a sculptor might reveal King David as he's chiseling away at the marble, or they might reveal Aphrodite as she is chiseling away at stone. Here is what I was doing last year. Which of the following details from du Maurier's The Birds supports the prediction that Nat would survive the attack? So if you've seen The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, it was based on a short story written much earlier which takes place in Great Britain called The Birds by Rebecca du Maurier. Option A, Nat is an exceptionally fast runner. Option B, the birds do not tear out his eyes. Option C, the birds have not yet learned how to attack human beings efficiently. And D, the birds are not screeching. Does this type of question support Plato's goal of opening the eye of the soul? Or are we disciplining the mind by forcing it into a pattern of passivity, of just sitting back and waiting for that single correct answer as we go about trying to solve a piece of literature as if it were an algebra problem? Are we training creativity out of our students? We do not grow into creativity, we grow out of it, or rather we are educated out of it, says Sir Kenneth Robinson. That concerns me. That is not the kind of teacher that I want to be. Standardized questions about literature teach students the crutch of being passive, not the agency of thinking for themselves and being creative. William Butler Yeats says education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Are we filling pails, or are we lighting fires? So, this was my dilemma. My question to myself as an educator is, how do I get back in the business of lighting fires? How do we open the eyes of the soul for our students? I found myself seeking new directions for evaluating literary comprehension. There's a short story called New Directions by Maya Angelou. It's actually based on the story of her grandmother, Mrs. Annie Johnson, and she found herself in a very difficult situation. Her husband left her to go on and be with another woman. She was a black woman, a single black woman in a time when it was very difficult for her to find a job in the South to support her family. And she was looking at the options like becoming a nanny and then being away from her kids all the time, or not having enough money to put food in their mouths. Finally, she looked up the road where she was going and back the way she had came, and she wasn't satisfied. So she decided to step off the road and cut herself a new path. I've been looking for ways to cut a new path in how I lead students to explore and understand literature. My new path has been to use Johari Windows for literary analysis. We have to go back a bit to the 1950s to Joseph Luft and Harry Ingram. Joseph becomes Joe and Harry becomes Harry, so Johari Windows comes from their names. These two individuals developed Johari Windows as a tool for improving small group communication. There are 4 quadrants or 4 panes or 4 areas to the Johari Window graphic organizer. These include the first area, which is the open or free area. The second area, which is the blind area. the third area, which is the hidden area, and the fourth area, which is the unknown area. So for Johari, we have public and private selves. An example that comes to mind for me is Robin Williams. Very popular, very talented, very well loved. We thought we knew him. We thought we knew what was going on inside his mind. We thought that his life was full of joy and happiness, and we thought he was satisfied. But there was an unknown area there, wasn't there? There was something the public was completely aware of that he hid from others. Johari Windows can help us understand real people, like Robin Williams, and also literary characters like Richard Cory. Here's an excerpt from the poem Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But he still fluttered pulses when he said good morning and glittered when he walked. This analysis of Richard Cory was discussed by Lothar Kromansky in the Journal of Reading, and you can see a citation there if you'd like to explore that further. So here I'm talking about some of the information that came from the Kromansky article. For the open quadrant or the public self, information is shared by the character, the other characters, and the reader. Then in the second area, or the blind quadrant or the blind self, this is information known by the other characters and by the reader, but not perceived by the character being analyzed. A good example of this would be Miss Brill. Miss Brill is sitting on a park. She thinks it's just great watching the world go by, watching the young people. She's having a conversation with the stole that she has on her shoulder, but she's not quite connecting with the people around her. And she feels like she's so much a part of what's going on, and actually the people around her are looking at her going, ooh, why doesn't she go away? So there's a public self, and there's a private self, and there's a blind self. There are things others are seeing in her that she's not seeing in herself. Area 3, the hidden quadrant or private self, information known only by the character. It can be inferred by other characters and by the reader. And the unknown quadrant or unknown self, information unknown by the character or the characters or the reader. This requires an inference or an extrapolation. Johari Windows can help students think about characterization and irony in new ways. So I had to check myself, make sure I wasn't chasing rabbits again, looking for a shiny piece of technology and getting obsessed with the technology and missing the content. Here we're coming back to the content. We're exploring situational irony, verbal irony, dramatic irony, direct and indirect characterization. So this is a way to graphically organize and scaffold these kinds of literary concepts with students. We can start with Area 1. This is literal information given through direct characterization about the character. What does he say? What does he do? What does she look like? Those kinds of things. Next up is the blind spot. This is where dramatic irony can come into play. And we look at indirect characterization. How does this character interact with others? How do they respond to him or to her? The facade. Here we make inferences about characters and their actions. So here within the facade, we might explore Catherine Ann Porter's stream of consciousness. There are some things going on within this character, like Granny Weatherall, that she's not choosing to share with the world. And then the hidden area or situational irony, here's how we induce why characters act the way that they do. When I look at this box, I think of something like Child by Tiger. Child by Tiger is actually based on actual events. It takes place in the South during the early part of the 20th century. And there's a tall, powerful man who seems to have it all together, but one day he goes into a rage and starts killing people. And people don't understand what happened to him. But then you look back at his life and his family and what he went through and how the history of slavery produced some psychological burdens that he carried with him every minute and every day. You can see how that was hidden just below the surface. Just like the ice that we couldn't see from the Titanic as we were approaching that iceberg. There was danger there. It was real, it was lurking, and it was hidden from us. So as we apply the Johari window analysis to the Richard Cory poem, we can look at some things like how does the author directly characterize Richard Corey? In The Blind Self, how does the author indirectly characterize Corey? For the hidden self, I want the students to create inference questions. Why did Richard Corey one calm summer night go home and put a bullet through his head? And then the unknown self. This is where the students start to get a little bit past their comfort zone. I'm asking them to extrapolate from the information within the story to make inductions. What repressed emotions or feelings led to Richard Corey's climatic act? And originally the students sort of go, well, I don't know. How could I know? It's not in the story. And so I encourage them, well, start thinking about your life experiences. Start thinking about people that you have known or heard about or read about. Who is like Richard Corey? Well, one of my students offered that Robin Williams is like Richard Corey. Exactly. What were some things that were going on within Robin Williams' life, like depression, mental illness, pain, that could have been going on in Richard Corey's life as well? So here we're starting to personalize the story, and we're starting to get beyond the roads. As they say in Back to the Future, where we're going, there are no roads. And sometimes students need to off-road a bit so we can learn how to be creative and so we can learn how to do those deeper inductions for AP level classes. You may have seen this before. Can you connect these 9 dots using 4 lines? But once you put your pencil down, you can't lift your pencil up again. So when you're drawing your lines, it's one continuous process. You don't pick up the pencil between lines. On a piece of scratch paper with a pen or a pencil or a highlighter, would you please solve the 9 dots question now? Can you connect these 9 dots with 4 lines without lifting your pencil after you've started? We'll let that go as a background process. I'll continue presenting and we'll talk about the solution before I conclude today. As we worked with Johari Windows in my classroom, I found my students struggled most with quadrant 4, the unknown. The most common question for my students is, what do I do with this 4th box in Johari Windows? I taught my students it's okay to extrapolate from the text. So I provide the students with some definitions. Induction. Any form of reasoning in which the conclusion, though supported by the premises, does not follow from them necessarily. This definition was one of those offered at dictionary.com. Inference. The process of arriving at a conclusion that, though not logically derivable from the assumed premises, possesses some degree of probability relative to the premises. So as the students are preparing for IB classes or AP classes, these are the kinds of skills that they're expected to have to perform well on their essays. So if we're taking a vertical teaming approach, I need to be working on this with my freshmen and with my sophomore students. So I told the students it's okay to go off-road. They can make extrapolations or inductive responses based on psychology, life experiences, or other things that they have read or people that they have known. And there's my allusion to Back to the Future, where we're going. We don't need roads. I confided to my students. Too often teachers tell students what to think. But this assignment is about your thinking. It's about process. It's about how to think instead of what to think. Johari Windows can also be used to show students how to generate different types of questions. This is important because I've been considering the blooming orange. You may have seen this before, but it's a way of thinking about Bloom's taxonomy. With Bloom's taxonomy, we start with lower levels of understanding, for example, apply, analyze, evaluate. Then as we reach the upper levels, we're asking students to, I'll try that again. We start with remember, understand, and apply. Those are the lower levels. Then we move up to analyze, evaluate, and create. So it's like there's a line separating the higher and lower level cognitive processes here. I want my students to learn how to identify, assess, prioritize, recommend, choose, and decide. I want my students to become better at creating, inventing, composing, constructing, designing, planning, and imagining. And I'm cognizant or aware of the fact that I'm not just pouring this into a bucket for the child as they're learning. I'm stepping back and letting them discover it and reveal what's already there. Dorothy Soule has an article in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, and she demonstrates that Johari Windows can be used to show students how to generate different types of questions. For example, we can look at quadrant 1. This is an easy question with a simple yes or no response. Quadrant 2 is an easy answer, but it's more complex. Quadrant 3 is difficult to answer, but it has a simple yes or no. And quadrant 4 is a question that's difficult to answer, and it's also complex. So we'll take a look at it as an example. Suppose you were analyzing the painting American Gothic by Grant Wood. Some simple or easy questions from quadrant 1 might include, is this a man? Is this a woman? A simple yes or no answer might involve a more difficult question, though, like, are they married? A complex or difficult question might be, how do you know? Then we can move up to complex answers for easy questions. What is the woman wearing? What does their clothing tell you about their professions? And then quadrant 4, complex and difficult. What does their clothing tell you about the couple's relationship to each other and to their society? So I model for students these different types of questions and how to create them. And ultimately my goal is to get the students to generate those questions on their own and then find the answers and support it with evidence or extrapolations from the text. I also took Johari Windows a step further by using pre-climatic and post-climatic Johari Windows. So the climax of the story, in many cases, is where the character makes an epiphany or discovery about themselves, about life, or about others. But sometimes we would have a different kind of Johari window before and after that epiphany or that climax. So we're not just using one Johari window, we're using two, and we're shifting the sizes of the quadrants between known and unknown as these characters are developing and evolving. Johari Windows led to direct and indirect characterization portrayals in the student's retelling of the short story All the Years of Her Life by Morley Callahan. I'd like to go to a bigger version of that, so we'll go to Storyboard that. All right, as we look at the story, All the Years of Their Life, we have a teenage boy who's pilfering, doing some petty thieving from the drugstore where he works. And he thinks that the store's owner, Mr. Carr, is completely unaware of what's going on. But in reality, Mr. Carr has been watching this for weeks and waiting for the opportunity to pick up the phone and call the police. 1 minute before you go, Alfred, and in this example, which is a recreation of what some of my students did, I've asked the students to include actual quotations from the story and a page number to support evidence for a close reading of the text. Here we have a goal. Alfred wants to sneak out of the store without getting caught with the items he stole from Mr. Carr. And as we're looking at the storyboard, that creation, we can see some indirect characterization, for example, body language. Mr. Carr has his arms crossed. We have a lack of eye contact here from the teenage boy, Alfred. He doesn't want to have any eye contact with Sam Carr. He wants to get out and not have to have an interaction. Mr. Carr has been watching Alfred pilfer from the shelves. So here we have just a summary of what's going on in the story. It's one of the lower levels on the Blooming Orange or Bloom's taxonomy. Now we have the O in G.O.T.E. Obstacle. Mr. Carr seems to suspect that something is wrong. He says maybe you should take a few things out of your pocket. You have at least a compact lipstick and 2 toothpaste tubes. Alfred's face gets red as he takes out the item and sets them on the counter. So here we have something which Alfred is probably not aware of. So it's going on in the hidden area where others can see what he's doing, but he's not aware that he's blushing at this. What do you mean? Do you think I'm crazy? This is an actual quotation from page 1 of the story. And the tactic he's using here on G.O.T.E, the tactic is denial. Mr. Carr threatens to call the police, but he actually calls Alfred's mother. Here we have another tactic being used, and this here is mock contrition. It only happened once. I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again. If you just don't call my mom, everything's going to be okay. So we find that with G.O.T., we have more than one tactic being used. For those of you who have young children or grandchildren, you're probably very familiar with that canyon they have at the grocery store, where there are candies and gizmos and knickknacks and shiny things, and you have to walk 6 or 8 feet to get to the register, and meanwhile your kids are going like this, can I have this, can I have that? This is an example in real life of how people are using G.O.T, or goals, obstacles, tactics, and expectations. My 5-year-old has a goal, and her goal is to get that chocolate candy bar. And she has an obstacle. Mom or dad doesn't want her to have a candy bar. There are too many reasons not to. So she pulls out her first tactic, and that first tactic is, pretty please, pretty please. Well, that tactic doesn't work, so she quickly shifts gears to a second tactic, and here she starts to have her mock meltdown or temper tantrum. Well, that's not working. It's going to get her walked out to the car, and she'll have to sit there by mom or dad and miss out on everything else going on inside the grocery store. Then there's the third tactic. I'll be really good when I get home. I'll make my bed. I'll clean the room. I'll help with the dishes. Sure, she will. But she has multiple tactics when she tries to get what she's after. And her expectation is eventually mom or dad will wear down and she'll get what she's after. Characters do the same thing. We have our goals, our obstacles, our tactics, and our expectations as characters, and sometimes we use multiple tactics to try to get what we want. Here we can see this young man trying multiple tactics, including denial, mock contrition. And then when mom comes, well, he thinks mom's going to get him off the hook and everything's going to be okay. When mom comes, she does something he's never seen her do before. She seems to flirt with Mr. Carr. Expectation. Alfred believes his mother can get him out of trouble again, just like she has always done. But now we have something new. We have an epiphany. Alfred discovers something new about his mom and about himself. When they get back home, mom's demeanor is completely different. She's in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at her coffee. And Alfred just wants to talk about the day. Gosh, Mom, that was great. That was some smooth talking. I didn't think you'd get Mr. Carr to let me go like that. But you did, Mom. That was awesome. And Mom says, be quiet. I don't want to hear another word from you. And for the first time, he sees in her face fear and anger and frustration. And there's a revelation or an epiphany, and the light comes on. And we can see that here through the body language on Storyboard that Mom has her arms in the air. She's had absolutely enough. The young man, Alfred, he wants to jam. He thinks it was a great experience until he discovers what she was hiding from him before. And that's how very concerned and how very ashamed she felt. Here's an example of a student using 2 Johari Windows, pre-climatic and post-climatic, for all the years of her life. I had to take that out because it's an example of student work, but I kept the basic information that was in their analysis. We can start with Alfred, or start with Mrs. Carr, start with Alfred's mom. She initially seems calm and dignified when she goes into the drugstore to see Mr. Carr, but hiding within that, she's worried and disappointed. Before others, she appears to be shy and humble, but here is the extrapolation or the induction. Why does Mrs. Higgins seem to have been in this position before? That was a question generated by the student. Then I would also have them provide some evidence from the story or some extrapolations to support that answer. Now we come back to the 9 dots puzzle. Here we have 4 lines. They're made without picking up the pen or the pencil, but we have to go outside the area of the 9 dots. This is where the expression thinking outside the box comes from. We need to think outside the box. And to truly get a good handle on what modernist writers are doing in literature, we need to approach character studies the same way. We need to be prepared to think outside the box. For Hemingway, the dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above the water. Hemingway believes it's the onus or responsibility of the author to do the full 8/8, to know everything about the character that's not being revealed through the story. Because if he or she doesn't do that, they'll have hollow characters when they write. So there has to be information that is missing or left out. But the author is fully aware of it. Here are some online tools that you can use for Johari Windows for classroom activities. We can start with some positives. Johari Window was invented by Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingram in the 1950s as a model for mapping personality awareness. So what happens is the students create a unique name. This is Bobby 378. Your results are now saved under a name of your choosing so you can send your friends and colleagues directly to your window. So you'll go through and pick 6 words that you think apply to yourself. Bobby 378. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we save that. Your profile has been saved. Your Johari window initially looks like this: dignified, idealistic, ingenious, organized, powerful, and spontaneous. Now the next step is to ask several of your friends and colleagues to say which words they associate with you. You can do this by directing them to the following link. So you share this link through a learning management system like Haiku, or through email, or by simply writing it down. And here, the people within your group of 3 to 5 students are going to rate you and try to determine which 6 positive qualities best describe you. Okay. Now we're seeing a difference between how Rayanne views Bob and how Bob sees himself. So in this blind spot, Rayanne says that Bob is cheerful, helpful, observant, self-assertive, sentimental, and silly. Those are some things that are true that Bob wasn't seeing in himself, but nevertheless, they were there. How brave are you? There's also a negatives Johari window creator. This is called the no Harry window. So if you're willing to accept some constructive criticism, you can also complete some negative attributes about yourself and have other students in the room also complete some negative attributions about yourself. You go through the same process and you try to find out, okay, how well is my image of myself actually matching up with the images of others? Would you like a few minutes to explore this online tool? All right. Perhaps when you get back to your home schools, you can explore that a little further. What I emphasize is there's a process where students can learn that sometimes they see themselves and the world differently than others may see them or how they view the world. And the same thing is true when we look at someone like Miss Brill or Granny Weatherall or characters like that. I'd like to take a moment now to explore a hooked line and sinker or reeling in good books book review. This explores spare parts, 4 undocumented teenagers, 1 ugly robot, and the battle for the American dream. This book was written by Joshua Davis. In the beginning, we start off at Carl Hayden High School. We have some kids who've basically been written off by society. Some of these students are undocumented. No one's expecting them to go to college. No one's expecting them to have much of a future beyond just going out and working with manual labor. But there's a robotics club in the school, and anyone who's interested can join. They come in during their free period or homeroom time, and they try to solve some robotic problems and come up with their creativity the best that they can. We're supposed to build a robot that can perform underwater tasks. What is a task? How are we going to do that? Oscar, Luis, Lorenzo, and Christian all joined the robotics club in high school. 3 of the 4 students on the underwater ROV, or remotely operated vehicle team, were illegal aliens from Mexico. So they lived in poverty and constant fear of deprivation. Robot Schmobot were not even legally in this country. Lorenzo, we have no money for parts to build a robot. We don't even have a pool. So the kids are starting off feeling like they don't have much of a shot at this. But there are some specific goals that they are supposed to be able to meet. And those goals include measure the submarine's length, calculate its depth, navigate inside the sub to recover a bell, recover 2 lost items, and sample liquid in the cargo barrels. With very little money to build, their teachers Freddie and Alan encouraged students to make phone calls for advice and donations. Enter Frank Swankowski, a temperature engineer, who offered them a thermocouple with a cold junction compensator. So the kids are learning to reach out to experts and get some advice on how to do their project. Building Stinky was challenging. They used PVC pipe for the frame and a waterproof plastic briefcase for the wiring. Then they used a balloon to sample liquid underwater. So this was all done with PVC pipe, which is basically plastic. You have to use a glue to hold the pieces together, and the glue was really, really stinky, which is where the robot derived its name. Scuba Sciences in Phoenix allowed students to test Stinky. They had a scuba store and a 40 by 20 foot saltwater pool for testing scuba equipment. Let's use this hula hoop for the obstacle course. Stinky has been baptized. I can pick Stinky up. He's not too heavy to me. So here we have evidence of the students doing a close reading of the text and also hopefully lighting a fire under other students to make them want to explore this nonfiction book. So Carl Hayden High School is in West Phoenix, Arizona. The contest for the ROVs is in Santa Barbara, California. Not only did Stinky have to complete the obstacle course and the task, but the students had to answer questions about how it was built. Most of the points given was for the interview and the written explanation. How did you? PWM, pulse width modulation. ESTO controls analog circuits with digital output. So they had some problems they had to work through as they were developing their Stinky robot. An example would be refraction. For example, as a ray of light hits the pool, it's going to bend. They had to calculate that as they were designing their Stinky robot. They were all hoping for at least 3rd place behind MIT engineering students and other colleges with good robotic programs. But surprisingly, they won, including the Technical Writing Award. So now we come to the hook, in the hook, line, and sinker. What are some big idea questions that make you want to keep reading this book? Number 1, how are the poor Mexican kids from the desert going to compete in an underwater ROV competition against engineering students who have $11,000 invested in their robots? How are they going to solve all their tasks? What are they going to name their robot? Are they going to be deported? What happens to Louise, Christian, Lorenzo, and Oscar after the competition? Do the boys go on to college? Then we have a line, a sentence or 2 from the book that is so good you have to share it. Then Merrill leaned into the microphone and said the ROV named Stinky had captured the design award. It did not make any sense to Lorenzo. There's nothing pretty or elegant about the robot compared to the gleaming machines other teams had constructed. Stinky was a study in simplicity. The PVC, the balloon, the tape measure. In each case, they had chosen the most straightforward solution to the problem. Next in the hook, line, and sinker process comes the sinker. Why did you read this book? Or why did you want to read this book? Why do you think that others would like it? And here we have the students doing some writing, talking about why it's meaningful for them. Then we ask the students to come up with 5 or more similar titles. These can be by the same author. It can be in the same genre, the same series, the same subject. So we have some flexibility here. One problem I've encountered as I've had the students do an MLA list for books they're reading is sometimes we get to a series. MLA indicates that you go by the author's last name when you're creating a list, but I have given my students permission to go by the order of the books in a series. So for example, if we're doing a Harry Potter series for a book review, it really makes more sense to go in the series order of those books. So that's a modification I've made with my kids. And here we have some image attributions. So we're being responsible digital citizens, and talking about where the images came from that we used. Another sample book review goes to That Was Then, This Is Now by S.E. Hinton. It was also created using Storyboard That. Here we have an image that came from photosforclass.com. You can see we have an attribution in the bottom part of the picture. They grew up like brothers. Brian and Mark grew up together like brothers ever since Mark's parents died. Brian and Mark have a weird friend. They call him M&M in the first part of the book because he's always munching on candy, but later they call him Baby Hippie. Here I took two digital tools and I put them together. I went to iClipArt for schools and I typed in hippie and it came up with a background with the flowers. So I was able to insert a specific background which I thought showed the tone and the mood of what was going on for this character. This is another image that came from iClipArt. This young lady with long tresses or long hair. In terms of the purple behind her, I created that using Microsoft Paint on my computer. I saved it as a JPEG or a GIF, and then I imported that and put it in the background. So I was looking for more of a graphic novel or graphic illustrator kind of look, and that's why I went with the iClipArt and my own custom background. Angela instigates a fight between Ponyboy Curtis and a greaser, as he's called in the book, named Brian. Mark intervenes, but he's hit over the head with a bottle. The bottle and the ouch and the two boys are courtesy of iClipArt for schools. Ponyboy Curtis and his greaser friends decide to get revenge on Angela, the young lady with the long black tresses, by cutting her long, beautiful hair after she falls asleep at a party. When I went to create this particular frame with Angela, I had a problem because there is a bank full of characters on Storyboard That, but I couldn't find a character of a female with short hair. So I actually had to take two characters and I used the cropping tool. So I took a boy character and cropped the body, so I removed that part and just had a boy's head. And I had a young lady's body and took off the head and put those two images together to create this amalgamation or this picture of Angela with short hair. Brian and Mark confront the boy who cut Angela's hair. Mark wants to punish him, but Brian decides to deal with it by not hating him. One of the nice features I like about Storyboard That is for a lot of the characters in the character bank, you can have them facing front, you can have them on profile, you can show them from behind. So if I were talking to my speech students about a digital project and I wanted to say, okay, this is time for an over-the-shoulder shot. Show me how to set up an over-the-shoulder shot in your digital program. You can actually do that with Storyboard That. It's also possible to move arms and legs around, have facial expressions, head tilts, and those kinds of things. Here I took the background and I changed it to a grayscale or a sepia tone because I wanted the background to be less important than the characters, which I allowed to remain in full color. Mark reveals he knows what happened to M&M, who's been missing for a couple of days. Here's the hook. What are the big idea questions that make you want to keep reading? Well, Brian begins to suspect that his adopted brother, Mark, is a drug dealer, and he's the one who supplied the drugs to M&M, which nearly killed M&M. So those are some ways to create Storyboard That analyses for a book review. I'd like to go to Storyboard That, and you're certainly invited to do so if you'd like to play around with it a little bit. Storyboard That allows teachers to use it at the premium level for 2 weeks without any cost. So that's the trial period or sample period. And the nice thing about the premium level of Storyboard That is it has some class management tools. As you can see under Manage My Classroom, which I'm not going to actually open, I guess, because of revealing student names. But if I were to click on the Manage My Classroom tab, it allows me to organize projects by student name, by assignment, or by class. So that's a nice feature that goes along with it. If you use Storyboard That at the free level or the non-premium level, students can create up to 6 frames in a storyboard and up to 2 storyboards per week. If that's all you're looking for your storyboarding needs, then you don't need to invest any money in it. If you'd like to have the ability to have students create longer storyboards or do storyboard and graphic organizers more frequently, then it would cost between $60 and $70 a year for a yearly subscription. And then you have a lot more options. I'd like to create a storyboard this morning. And I can click on Storyboard Layout, and it gives me lots of interesting options. I can look at a traditional storyboard like you might see in your Sunday morning comics. I can create a T-chart, which I might use for a compare and contrast graphic organizer. I can set up a grid, which can also be useful for analyzing direct and indirect characterization for multiple characters. Here you'll see a Freyer model, which I've used with my students for learning vocabulary. The spider map is an excellent way to organize ideas. It's also called cluster mapping, and it's a way to create character webs. So I could put in Romeo and Juliet and other characters from Romeo and Juliet and explore their relationships. There's also a timeline or a plot line, and you can include actual dates in that as you set it up. And that's a good way to explore a plot and a timeline within something that you're making. For now, I'm going to go with the traditional storyboard. I'll click out on Layout again and click on Title, Cell, and Description because I want to put a literary term in the title box and I want to describe what's going on or provide a summary in the description box. I'm finding that I don't have enough frames here, so I'm going to click on Add Cells, and I can add cells all the way up to 24 for a single storyboard. That doesn't seem to be practical in actual use. I would recommend keeping the storyboard size down to 10 or 12 frames because we don't want the program to lock up and have any students get frustrated. I just told them to keep it down to 10 or 12 frames, and while they're doing that, to be careful in how they're using the memory size and not bringing in any big elephant file sizes as they're importing images. Here's Photos for Class. It's a tool you can use to search for an image. Perhaps I need to have a suspension bridge. Okay, here's a suspension bridge, which I can download. Then I can save it to a file. And then I can go to that folder and pull it out and put it into Storyboard that. So it's possible to load in specific pictures that way. We also have lots of scenes options on Storyboard that, including town pictures, indoor pictures. For example, I had to find a kitchen as I worked on All the Years of Her Life. Home outdoor images, school images, classrooms, athletics, classical homes, mythical and futuristic. So suppose I'm telling a story about a hobbit. I can drag and drop the hobbit picture into the frame. And there are some tools here like copy and paste. I can click on this and just move it over. My alignment's not quite right, so I'll click on the Align tool. And now it snaps into place, so we don't have any white edges around the outside. And that can be useful if you want to create Storyboard that to make an animated GIF later. For example, I have a storyboard where I have a dog in front of the Christmas tree and he's wagging his tail. And I'm making incremental or small changes in how that tail is moving. And then when I take those 6 images from Storyboard that, I can upload them into a GIF creator like Gicker, and we have animation. We have the appearance of life as a dog is wagging his tail. So it's useful to have a consistent background as you're doing something like making an animated GIF. Now I want a character. I think it's a good day for a centaur to go and visit the hobbit because they're best buds, as you know. Here comes a centaur. And I have half of what I need. Now I'll go to characters. Classical era would probably work best. Here we go. Soldier dude, exactly what I was looking for. So we'll put the soldier there, but I need to crop him. Excuse me. All right, so now I've cropped the image. I can add him to my centaur, make him a little bit bigger. And now I have fused Soldier Boy to the centaur. He's probably angry today, so I can click on angry, and now we have an angry Soldier Boy centaur, because you use those all the time. So these are some of the tools that you can use on Storyboard That. With the upload tool, you can click on upload images, select the files that you want to use. And then you can insert your image right into the background. And I'll snap that to fill the available space. Or you can also use this as a way to put something on a TV screen. If you have a living room for your scene and you have a TV and you want something on the screen, you can do that. You could also put a cloudy day in the window, or maybe a snow scene, and copy and paste that into the window scene if you're using a living room or an indoor area. What I've done with this is I've had the students create their storyboard that story. They save it. This is Angry Centaur. And after it's saved, you can download it as a PowerPoint. We are a bring your own device school, so I've got different kinds of devices out there among my students. Some of them have got Keynote, some of them have PowerPoint, some of them are strictly using Google Slides. But if I have them download the PowerPoint and save it on their desktop or in their folder, this takes a minute or two, then they can open up that PowerPoint folder, whether they're using Google Slides or whether they're using PowerPoint. And then they have the option of saving that to a GIF or a GIF. And then I'll put it in a GIF folder where there are 4 or 5 different pictures. And then a GIF creator like Gecker.com will allow them to animate that. Some students didn't want to use the online GIF creator, so they simply went to Google Slides. And within Google Slides, when you click on Publish, you can select the pacing or the timing between the slides. So you can set your transition down to 1 second. And then you have a slow animation, but it's still occurring. I'll go there for a moment, and then we'll wrap things up. Google Slides has a Publish to Web option. On the Publish to Web option, I can change it to every second, start slideshow as soon as a player loads, and restart the slideshow after the last slide. And then I can click on Publish. Yes, I want to publish that. And then once we have a shareable link, I have the students take that shareable link and copy and paste it to our learning management system. In my classroom, it's Haiku Learning. And I do that because it's not taking up a lot of file size, so I'm not running out of file capacity halfway through the year. But I can just click on the hyperlink and go right to their product. We can also use some wiki projects on Haiku Learning or a discussion board on Haiku Learning, and that allows the students to view and share and comment on what other students have done. I have more things on my website, lit-techweebly.com, than what I had time to cover this morning. But if you have interest and you have time, you can look at it later. The Freytag's pyramid Storyboard That plot is from the Storyboard That website. In fact, you can type in Storyboard That and Freytag's pyramid on Google and come up with the same hyperlink that I've used here. Overall, my goal has been to try to find ways to think outside the box, to help students do a close reading of literature, but also a closer reading of themselves and society, to try to find ways to connect dots in meaningful but new ways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. At this time, if there are any questions for Jeff, we could take those at this time. And Zoom participants, you are welcome to ask questions as well.
I appreciate your talking about creativity, critical thinking. How do you assess that? You know, what do you use then? Because that's the sticking point.
That's an excellent question, and that's where I found the blooming orange to be helpful. As we're talking about the kinds of questions they're generating while they're analyzing literature and the kind of answers they come up with, they're either going to be upper level areas on Bloom's taxonomy or lower level areas. So I'll say to my students something like this: I want you to generate 2 recall or remember questions and then find answers, 2 understand questions and find answers, and 2 apply questions and find answers. And then I'd like you to generate 1 analyze, 1 evaluate, and 1 create style prompt and respond to those. Evaluate and create are moving into a constructed response. So here a complete and thoughtful constructed response would be 1 to 2 paragraphs in length. So I'm looking for evidence of analysis, critical thinking, application to their own personal lives or society. We're looking for personal and psychological and cultural connections with the text.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.